All right, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us. To all of our online viewers, a little bit of audio issues. That's what's to be expected when you go live. My name's Laura Burrell. I'm with the Museum Education and Creative Programs Department at Bethel Woods Center for the Arts. And I'm here live from the event gallery space on our historic site. We are bringing you Bethel Woods at Home. This is the September edition of our online series, which was created to bring a sense of exploration and curiosity for our on-site programs to you in the convenience and safety of your home. Once a month, please join us to participate in interactive lectures, panel discussions like the one we have here today, performances and workshops that explore our historic legacy and the healing power of art, creativity, and community. What better way to celebrate the partnership with Big Eddy Film Festival and their move to the original Woodstock Festival site than a talk on the role music plays in bridging cultures, creating communities, and shaping our historical memory. Today, we present a moderated conversation inspired by the film Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. We have film director Mary Wharton, film writer Bill Flanagan, singer-songwriter Amy Helm, all moderated and led by Greg Triggs. So let me introduce to you Greg Triggs, who is a show director and writer whose client roster includes Disney Cruise Line, SeaWorld, and the Tribeca Film Festival. Among other distinctions, Triggs was an inaugural partner in excellence at the time of Disney's highest recognition. His work as a teacher and facilitator took him to Africa and the American School of the Yawande, where he taught teaching staff, school administrators, missionaries, and embassy personnel. Without further ado, Greg, take it away.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm half as interesting as I sounded in that bio. My name is Greg Triggs. Welcome to Bethel Woods at Home, or BW at Home, as those in the know call it. We have a very exciting show planned for you because this weekend, Bethel Woods is home to the Big Eddy Film Festival, which is, of course, sponsored by the DVAA. And last night, the festival opened with a wonderful new film that you've got to see if you weren't here, Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, which chronicles President Carter's love for music and how that passion helped his campaign unify post-Watergate America, something that I think we will probably need going forward. So let's learn from the past and put it toward the future. Today we will be discussing that film and music in films, as well as the power of live performance. So please welcome today's panel. We're going to start with Mary Wharton. Give everyone a wave if you don't mind, Mary. Mary is a director, writer, and producer, an award-winning storyteller whose feature Sam Cooke Legend won the 2004 Grammy Award for Best Music Film. Her other credits include Joan Baez, who I am personally obsessed with, How Sweet the Sound, and films about David Bowie, LL Cool J, Elton John, Fish, Pitbull, Jimi Hendrix, The Beatles, Elvis Presley, and musical icon Farrah Fawcett. Among other talents, Mary's latest work, Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, will be enjoying a worldwide release this year. We are also joined by the writer of Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, Bill Flanagan. Hello. His latest novel, 50 in Reverse, came out just this month and I can verify is available on Amazon right now. Flanagan has done essays for CBS Sunday Morning for almost 20 years, and he hosts the Sirius XM radio programs Northern Songs, The Fab Forum, and Flanagan's Wake. Flanagan spent 20 years to the exact day at MTV Networks, where he created and produced series including VH1 Storytellers and CMT Crossroads. He retired in 2015 as an executive vice president, Viacom Music Group. He has written 7 books and articles for many major publications, including Esquire, Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, Rolling Stone, Men's Journal, and the New York Times. And to be our direct live performance music expert, we have Amy Helm, who is a lifelong music lover and an American singer-songwriter and daughter of the band drummer Levon Helm and singer Libby Titus. She is a past member of Levon Helm's Midnight Ramble Band and Ola Bell. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, good. Ola Bell. Yeah. Helm was born in the area in Woodstock, New York, and spent her childhood between Woodstock, LA, and New York City. She attended Trinity High School, where she studied jazz with Dr. Aaron Bell while singing in bands, and in high school, playing in New York City clubs and bars. So she's my kind of woman. Amy currently tours year-round with her own band and continues to perform and produce concerts at Levon Helm Studios in Woodstock, the home of the Midnight Ramble. So please welcome all 3 of our panelists. I'm going to start with the film. Bethel was the perfect place to show this film. I think the setting was so naturally beautiful. During COVID precautions, which we are of course honoring today, we're socially distanced. We all came in masked up and our hands have no germs on them. We were... We may have slipped a few in since we last sanitized, but they were in the open amphitheater last night, where we will be tonight for the film Gossamer Folds. Beautiful evening, crisp air, and a wonderful film. So we're going to get to you guys in a second, but we want to hear from you first, Amy, because you were the audience last night. What did you think of the film? How did you enjoy it? What did you leave feeling or thinking?
I thought the film was incredible. I was telling Mary, and I get to tell Bill now too, I was really moved by the film. I didn't know a lot about Jimmy Carter, and I didn't realize what a hero he was. And as you had said, a timely one, someone who was, I didn't realize he was an artist. He was a poet, and a very humble man who should be looked up to and studied and revered. So I really enjoyed the film so much. Yeah.
And how did it feel for both of you having the film seen at the site of the original Woodstock concert?
It was really beautiful. You know, right when the movie started, there were shooting stars going across the sky right above the screen, and it was such a beautiful night. And you know, it's been a really terrible time to release a movie when there are no theaters open. So it was so gratifying and to be, you know, in a space with other humans looking at the movie on a big screen the way it was intended with a proper sound system.
I think that's such a good point, Mary. The films that I've seen during the festival so far, it's just so nice to be getting out of my iPad or out of a screen, being with other people, getting to see how people I don't share my home with are enjoying the film.
Yeah.
So that was part of the experience for you. Was it the first time you'd seen it with an audience that big?
Well, we saw it one other time at a drive-in screening, which was great, but you don't get the same thing when everyone is in their own cars. You know, it's still a big screen and there are people around you, but when with an audience like we had last night, even though we were all socially distant from each other, I could hear when someone would laugh nearby, and that would make other people laugh. And it's that communal experience that we're all so craving right now, was such a remarkable thing. And then obviously to be in this beautiful historic location of you know, the Woodstock site, and to be watching these incredible performances that, you know, I think is one of the things that is so special about what we were able to do with this film is the archival performances that we found where Carter was there or that had some, you know, relation to the story that we're telling. It was just fabulous to be sitting outside on the grass and watch, you know, Dizzy Gillespie performing on the White House lawn. There was just this really amazing sort of strange connection about being there with grass around you. And it sort of felt like we were on the White House lawn watching Dizzy Gillespie and Jimmy Carter sing Salt Peanuts together, you know?
And just a little insight, like who knew that Jimmy Carter was friends with Greg Allman? I would never have guessed that in a trivia contest. Never would have guessed it. Bill, how did it feel to you?
I was not here last night.
Oh, well, you missed a wonderful
I'm listening to Mary, I'm going, man. Well, here's the funny thing. When Mary approached me with Chris Farrell, the producer, about working on this, we went to lunch and Mary said, we're thinking of doing a film about Jimmy Carter and music. And I said, well, you mean he's best friends with Greg Allman and the Allman Brothers supported the thing, and he had Dylan over to the house. And I said, well, everybody knows that. And Mary said, no, see, that's the thing. Nobody knows that. And it's kind of true. I mean, unless you were just at the right age and reading Rolling Stone every week and following politics and rock music, it's not a story people know. And then to be able to actually talk to President Carter and to be able to talk to all those musicians was a dream. It was
Bill,
a dream.
just very quickly for the audience who might watch this after the fact and see it on a streaming platform or search it out on the internet, just give us a quick list of some of the bands that were performers, musicians that were interviewed for the film.
Well, we've got Jimmy Buffett, we've got Greg Allman, we've got Bob Dylan, we've got Roseanne Cash, we've got Paul Simon, we've got Nile Rodgers, we've got
Bono.
Oh, Bono, him again.
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood, and
Willie Nelson.
Willie Nelson.
Chuck Leavell.
Chuck Leavell, thank you,
Leavell
Amy.
is amazing.
See, to me, it's just another day at the office.
This guy.
But yeah, I mean, everybody wanted to do it for President Carter. You know, I mean, Bob Dylan doesn't do stuff like that. Bob Dylan.
No, and such personal reflections that touched on Dylan's own evolution spiritually as well. So you could see that the relationship went in both directions, which I thought was wonderful. I think there are so many wonderfully subtle moments where one statement will reverberate in a beautiful way. And by the way, Roseanne Cash is in your documentary, and she is also in one that is another part of the Big Eddy Film Festival, the documentary called Love, Vivian, which is about Roseanne Cash's mother, Vivian, Johnny Cash's first wife. So we may give the Big Eddy Film Festival a subtitle, also known as the Roseanne Cash Film Festival.
Well, you can't go wrong with Roseanne Cash.
No, she was a wonderful storyteller.
Mary kept saying to me during the edit, she said, you know, I just got to keep going to Roseanne.
Yeah.
Because she just, you know, she's so smart, she's so articulate, and she cuts through.
Yeah.
cuts through. She lays it on the line. I can imagine she does not suffer fools in person. Now, let's get back to your perceptions, Amy. When you go back to the film and you see the performance and the continuation and how it changed the energy for so many people, what do you respond to? How does that touch on your work as a musician who is touring the country and performing live when circumstances allow, or last night online?
Well, the performances in the film, and something that you said a second ago that I thought was so interesting throughout the film, you can see that it's going both ways between Jimmy Carter and the musicians. You can feel the respect and the admiration. And I was really moved by, I don't know if I'm directly answering what you asked, but
Whatever you're saying, it's interesting, so we'll just go with it.
I'm going to go with this because I thought this was such a significant part of his story, was that this man was not just a fan of music and a music lover, but he came up in the church singing, and his first understanding of music wasn't listening and applauding, it was engaging, it was participating in it. And I think that that's true for his generation, particularly down south. And you can see then from that seed of that beginning for him, how that led to his poems and how that led his ear to taking in Dylan's poems. And then the whole thing unraveling, it was really like, it was as much a portrait of an artist, to my mind, as it was a portrait of a president, which is something that was so cool about, one of the things that was so cool about the film.
Thank you. But I think that was what was so interesting to me is, with my background in making documentaries about artists and musicians, was to kind of co-opt that form of the classic music documentary form, but make a music doc about a president. It just sort of delighted me a little bit to think, no one's ever done this before, make a music doc about a president, And so it was really fun to do that. And, it was Bill's genius idea to have people read Carter's poems for the film. And he did an amazing job of picking out, he would offer to the people, here's a couple of things that I thought you might like to read, and they would choose, something. But I just thought that was such a brilliant idea, and it's so wonderfully, came to life with when Roseanne reads
the poem
about her father. I mean, it's Jimmy talking about his father, but it's you just automatically think she's talking about her relationship with her father because the writing is so true. And I think that's, one of the things that people keep asking me about in the press interviews that I've been doing lately for the film is why it's sort of easy to understand why anyone would be a fan of a musician, say. Obviously, like, we're all fans of Bob Dylan, right? But why is Bob Dylan a fan? I don't know if you would call him a fan, but what is the connection? Why were they drawn to Jimmy Carter?
Totally.
And I keep coming back to this notion of truth, that Jimmy Carter, one of the things that he was famous for in his campaign speeches is his stump speeches, he would always say, "I'll never tell a lie to the American people. If you ever find me telling you a lie, then don't vote for me." And he was a truth teller, and he told America the truth even when they didn't want to hear it. And I think that that's what songwriters do, is they look for the truth. There's that famous line from, is it Holland Howard? Is that his name?
3 chords in the truth.
3 chords in the truth are all you need to write a song, right? And Jimmy Carter told the truth. He was the truth. He was the embodiment of the truth. And I think that's what musicians connected to with him, and especially during that time, coming out of Watergate and the Vietnam War, and an era of darkness and deception, and people being mistrustful of the government. And he offered the truth.
Well,
And
thank God that will never happen again. But within that spirit, I thought one of the, again, there are so many quiet moments in this film that you took advantage of, right? You discovered when he acknowledges President Ford in his inaugural
Yes.
address. And it blew me away. And I think that respect is something we need to find the new version of. And it was such a lovely example of that. So Bill, let's bring you in. And what is one of your favorite moments? When I ask you one of your favorite moments in the film, what's one of the first ones that comes to mind?
Well, now I have to translate from remembering the actual experience of making it to what's in the film. You know, I think that Chip Carter talking about his dad, talking about being a kid going to school in a very prejudiced time in a segregated place, and his parents were liberals, and his parents supported Black people and civil rights, and Chip would get beat up. He would come home with his shirt torn up. His mother would give him another shirt and send him back to school. You know, you start to realize that this isn't just PR. I mean, what Jimmy Carter and the Carter family stood for was really, really hard in that place, in that time. But the decency that you talk about when you acknowledge President Ford for all he'd done to bring the country together, that fundamental decency that comes from the church, that comes from singing those hymns, that comes from believing it, gives him an authority, a power to say, I'm not going to be dissuaded. I'm going to do what's right, you know? And
I love that. That quote really stuck out to me. I'm going to paraphrase it now, but he said, basically, I didn't worry about the criticism because I knew what I was doing was right.
Because he was, you know, answering to a higher power.
Speaking of higher powers, I'm going to go out to the audience for a second. Start thinking about questions you might have and put them down in the comment section for us, because we'd love to hear the thoughts that our discussion is inspiring. And while you're down at the comment bar, also let us know where you're watching from. We would love to know how wide a net our show is casting right now. Chip Carter, I loved those moments too, because you did a very nice, subtle job of setting up President Carter's father, and little moments like President Carter saying, my father would only let us listen to the radio 15 minutes a day because he didn't want us to wear out the battery. And then you cut to Chip Carter later in the documentary, and he says, my dad had the best stereo in Plains, Georgia, and he taught us how to play it. We could listen to music whenever we wanted to. So you see those little generational shifts. And I also thought one of the most powerful moments in the film was Chip Carter acknowledging drug use and that there had been smoking of marijuana in the White House, for example. But I think it's a credit to the filmmakers that it was not sensationalized, and it was presented as something that I moved beyond with my parents' support. They were there for me, and I never felt judged. And I think that was a wonderful thing about President Carter too. For example, Greg Allman in the footage is arrested for having pharmaceutical grade cocaine, and Jimmy Carter didn't take him off the election or try to erase his support or the campaign trail.
And
Bill.
everybody was telling him he had to do it. You know, you got to put it in context. The Allman Brothers played concerts for Carter, and Carter came out and spoke to the audience, fundraisers, before people knew who Carter was. Now Carter wins the nomination. He's come from way back in the pack. He's going to be the Democratic nominee. Greg Allman is busted for cocaine. Greg Allman gives testimony against one of the Allman Brothers band's roadies for getting him the cocaine. He makes a deal with the prosecutors. The Allman Brothers won't speak to Greg Allman. The rock community turns its back on Greg Allman. Everybody, it isn't just now conservatives, is that his own group has cast him out. And of course, all Jimmy Carter's people go, you got to cut ties with this guy. You've gotten everything you can get out of him anyway. Now you've got to just, you know, Dickie Betts isn't speaking to him. Get him out of here. And Carter wouldn't do it. He was like, no, he's a human being. He needs help now more than ever. So I'm going to stick with him.
I thought there was a wonderful, Chip Carter implied it. And again, I'm going to be paraphrasing, but he said, my father answers to a higher power and it relieves him from needing to judge people.
Yeah.
My father, again, I'm paraphrasing, but creates opportunities for people to get past what he might consider their issues rather than simply judging them. What was the process like, because there is such incredible archival footage, and when we were getting ready for the show, Mary said that she was a bit of a library nerd when she was in high school, so I assume you really enjoy the research that has to go into being a documentarian.
It definitely is one of my favorite parts about making documentary films, is digging into the archive, and I get into it myself. I have a fantastic archive producer who worked with us on this film, and he found us a lot of amazing stuff, but I still am like, you know, digging around and trying different search terms to see if I could find things, because a lot of the footage wasn't necessarily properly labeled. Like, for example, there's a fantastic piece of footage from a Carter rally where Jimmy Buffett performed. And we knew that this had happened because Jimmy Buffett told us about it, and then we asked Carter about it, and we had some details, but no one could find the footage. I had my archive producer looking, I had my photo archivist looking for photographs, I had my assistant who worked with me just like digging around in the Carter Library, I had another researcher looking in the National Archives. It was like everyone was looking and we couldn't find it. And I just kept digging and trying different search terms. And finally, in the ABC News library, I found a clip that was from Portland, Oregon. It was approximately the right date, and it said Carter Rally with a folk singer. Now, in 1976, I don't think Jimmy Buffett would have been classified as a folk singer.
Well, he was by somebody working at the TV station.
I guess so. But like the producer or whoever at ABC News they weren't so celebrity obsessed, I guess, back then. And they didn't think like this famous musician. I mean, he had a big record back then, right? I mean, I don't remember, but
this is a little off topic, but you just made me think of it. Mary and I did a lot of shows together at VH1 in the 90s. And one of your greatest accomplishments was we were doing The Doors. Remember this? And you came in one day with a smile on your face. I think you'd gotten your sister to go to the local TV station
in
Miami, gone through the tapes from around the time Jim Morrison was busted in Miami for exposing himself, and found a whole interview the local news did with Jim Morrison.
Nobody had ever seen this.
Nobody had ever seen it. I mean, and it was so revealing. And it wasn't just about Miami. It gave you a picture of him. And that's, Detective Mary Wharton.
I always wanted to be Nancy Drew. I was sort of Farrah Fawcett obsessed too from Charlie's Angels. I wanted to be a private detective or a librarian. And I wound up being something that I get to do all of those things.
So anyone watching with kids right now, pay attention to those little quirks or those little niche talents your kids show, because they'll find their outlet. Speaking of which, Bill, I understand that you're a bit of a hero too, because we were talking about the footage with Greg Allman, who was a pivotal part, I think, of the Jimmy Carter story as it relates to music. And of course, he's no longer with us, and he was not when the film was in production, but you had participated in a different session and were aware of footage that could be recontextualized for this documentary, if I understood
Not
correctly.
long before Greg Allman died, I worked on an exhibit at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on rock and politics. And I had done an interview with the Allman Brothers around 1979 or 80, where Greg told me the whole story of meeting Jimmy Carter and the party and, all that. So I said, we have to get Greg Allman into this exhibit. and we sent another fella down to do it, but I wrote the questions. I said, get Greg to talk about this, 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 and this. So of course, when this came up, it was like, we got Greg. I know where it is.
Now, within that spirit, Bill, when I was doing my research on you, I found myself thinking, well, a film that maximizes archival footage so much, what is the role of the writer in a documentary, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying that you help shape the interviews that are shot specifically for the documentary and things like that. Could you talk about that process a little bit?
Well, when we decided to do this, one of the first conversations Mary and Chris and I had was, let's not, I mean, this is sort of a sidebar, but it was kind of like, let's not get hung up on titles. Let's do it like Merchant Ivory. Let's say Mary's the director, Chris is the producer, Bill is the writer, and everybody's going to do part of everybody else's job. That's inevitable. I mean, Mary's a producer too, but it just seemed like the cleanest way to do it, rather than say written by Bill and Mary, produced by Chris and Mary and Bill, and so was there a more of a question than that?
Well, but I'll say, that Bill, it was first of all, we wanted to have him be part of it because he is so great at coming up with these big ideas. And like I mentioned, it was his idea to have people read Carter's poetry because it was sort of the closest that Jimmy Carter got to being a songwriter, was writing these poems. But also having him do the bulk of the interviews for me was such a relief, quite frankly, for me, because when you're directing and you're managing a crew, and especially with a low budget documentary where we didn't have a big team of people to help, it was us, it was me and Bill and Chris, really, and obviously the technical crew and the camera, the director of photography and the sound person and all of that, but just to have him help to shape the interviews and obviously write his questions, and also we would get into a room when we were sort of figuring out what the aspect of the story and which parts of these great interviews we were going to use, and we would fight it out, as you do. Like,
there's still another good 90 minutes of stuff that didn't make it in the film, some of which I really feel mad about.
He's still mad about.
I mean, let me just throw you one. The Carters' distant cousin, Elvis Presley, who would call the White House all the time, asking to get his friend out of the drunk tank across from Graceland. I kind of think that would have been good to have in the film.
Well, speaking of the film and its sum total, with such a small team and a limited budget, how long did it take from green light to final edit to make the film?
Well, Chris and I first started working on the treatment in the fall of 2017. And we got it to the president right around Thanksgiving of that year. And we've heard right around Christmas time that the president wanted to do it. And so Chris and I got on a plane. I remember it was January 2nd, 2018, that we flew down to the Carter Center to meet with the gentleman who runs the Carter Center, Phil Wise. He was sort of like the gatekeeper to the president. And we had been told that his nickname at the Carter Center was Dr. No. And he told us that, he said, I get a proposal for a documentary at least once a week, and I say no to all of them, really. So we felt very lucky to have this opportunity. And then there was a Carter he was a very busy man, even at that point, at 94, I think he was then, but they said he has some time on his schedule in February if you want to come shoot an interview with him. So we got together, and we hadn't even done the real bulk of the research yet for the movie, but we saw an opportunity. And Chris, the producer, we didn't even have any money at that point. Chris just said, well, I'm going to fund this and get this this ball rolling with his own money. He put his own, money on the line and we all just, started working and through sort of sheer, I don't know, will and the powers that be in the universe, it all started clicking into place. But it was 2 solid years of 2018 and 2019 of production and post, and
Well spent.
yeah.
That first day when we shot The President in Atlanta, I was talking to him, and the crew, the people who had set everything up, are sitting out of sight at a long table over there. And Mary's sitting there. And the president's talking, and I hear snoring.
One of the lighting guy fell asleep.
Oh, no, it was Mary gave him a shot.
Kick the chair.
I'm listening to the president, but in the corner of my eyes, I see Mary kicking this guy.
What a world. I
Wow.
think that Amy used a word that was perfect for how President Carter comes off in the interviews. She used the word humble. And he has a little smile on his face throughout the interview and kind of a giggle in his voice, as if to say, can you imagine that this happened, that I got to be part of this? And we were talking about curiosity earlier, and that is probably one of the most important qualities in an artist. If you don't retain your curiosity, you're probably on the short path to becoming a hack, right? Because on some level, you're not experiencing or feeling what you want your audience to feel. And I'm going to go back to the audience again. If you've thought of any questions that you would like us to ask today's panel, please let us know. Just throw them there in the comments. And we're going to transition to Bethel Woods and music as a bigger subject past the film. Because of course we're in a world-class facility and probably one of the top 5 historical facilities for music. And it's one of the themes in the film. But let's start with you, Amy. You were talking last night about performing music online versus being in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
Why don't you, since we're talking to an online audience right now, why don't you share some of those feelings about the online experience versus the rush you get in front of a live audience?
Yes. Well, last night was my first experience doing a web, what do they call it? A web stream, a webcast? I don't know. Live stream. It was at a beautiful spot, Caramore. Wonderful people and wonderful group of people that are giving jobs to musicians. So I was very happy to be there, and yet feeling grateful for the gig. I found it very awkward, and Mary said, "Did you feel like you were in a vacuum?" And that's the perfect word for it, because I think too, like, you're the way, for me, the way that I sing, and I think the way the band plays and the way that we even connect to each other on stage, it's going to change depending on what's happening energetically in the audience. Without that, it's difficult to know if you're moving anybody, because that's the whole point of doing it, right? Because it starts to feel a bit like a rehearsal. But I'm sure if I do it a few more times, I might have much more positive feedback about the experience.
You'll find new rewards for it, but it sounds like when you recount the story that you miss the circular communication with the audience. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and not to throw it back to the film, but I was actually just thinking about this. The other thing with that.
Go ahead, throw it back to the film.
Okay, you can see that circular, that symbiotic relationship, because Jimmy Carter was so in love with this music. It felt to me it was by happenstance that the music became part of his ride to victory. It was, right, that was like a secondary thing. It was that he was really in love with these words and these performances, and when you're watching the musician or the singer play in this incredible footage throughout your documentary, you're seeing their performance shift because they're feeling his gaze on him, in a sense, like that, what Bob Dylan says about seeing his work reimagined, realizing that it had reached Jimmy Carter and reached the White House, and so I think that's a great example of that symbiotic thing. It's not even just from the stage to the audience, but it's in every conversation. It's in every way we listen to something, and then it's again that participation of
what it meant to Mingus.
I was going to ask about that Mingus
You know,
clip.
the fact that Charles Mingus,
Yeah.
one of the greatest American musicians who ever lived, in a wheelchair at the end of his life, after being, you know, beneath the underdog, an outsider in society, is brought to the White House, honored by the President of the United States. The President comes down and walks over and puts his arm around him.
Yeah.
You know, now I remember Sue Mingus, his widow, telling me that story. And to see it in the film, you just go like, that's America. That's what America should be. That's what a president should be.
Yeah.
You know?
And that scene is so remarkable to me too, because it speaks so much to Carter's bravery that he was able to stand on the White House lawn in front of, you know, all the news cameras that were there, and this audience of Congress people and musicians, and call out America's racist past and not shy away from it, and just, you know, just say it, like say the truth, you know, of the matter. It was really brave of him to do that, and he was a very quietly brave man in everything he did, and that's just a great example of it.
Well, and I think it folds back to talking about the truth, right? If you don't have to hide behind anything if the truth is on your side.
Yeah.
And, you know, elements of the truth are interpreted, I suppose, but that was his truth. And it took me right back to that phenomenal moment where we were watching a much younger Aretha Franklin sing God Bless America.
Yeah.
And I still get a little emotional. You know, on my drive here to Bethel Woods, there's a huge flagpole that used to have the American flag on it, and it's not up there right now. And that always makes me sad. I wonder why the person has taken it down. Is it for the very practical purpose of getting a new flag, or you know, perhaps fixing the one that was there? Or is that person's interpretation of where we are right now? I don't know the answer, but it was so thrilling to see Aretha Franklin as such a powerful woman, and to know who she went on to be past that moment, and just owning that song in a different kind of vacuum, because you could have heard a pin drop. Because the audience was so enthralled. And I think very often now our entertainment needs more bells and whistles around it to sustain. But the simplicity of that moment against where, when, and how it was being performed, I'm so glad that that didn't go the way of Elvis Presley in calling for the drunk tank. But I think we may even have a few questions from our audience. So go ahead and please let us know.
Well, we have viewers from all over: northern Wisconsin, Columbus, Ohio, Belgium, Tallahassee, Florida, which is Mary's hometown, and of course locally in Hurleyville.
We are huge in Belgium.
Moving from a little bit less emotional and more technical, audiences want to know what work went into getting the audio clips and the archival footage, which likely had low quality due to aging. So it's into the quality that they were presented in the film, which was so crisp, so clean.
Whoever gave us that question, thank you. My mind was not going to go towards technical questions.
Well, I will say that our audio mixer, Sue Polino, is a genius, and she did an amazing, amazing job with this movie. But yeah, the sound quality of some of that archival footage was terrible, quite frankly, but she was able to clean it up. And remarkably, though, some of it is just fabulous, because a lot of the performances that we were able to find were shot on film, and that film has survived in a better way than videotape. Some of the stuff, you know, Aretha's performance, we did rescue that from a bad old piece of videotape, and it somehow cuts through. I mean, the sort of, there's something about Aretha and that just her voice would survive a nuclear holocaust. I'm pretty sure.
Emotion in her eyes. You can see the emotion in her teeth when she's singing. It's just such a pure moment. I didn't mean to interrupt the technical aspect.
But
it sounds incredible too. Like you can hear all the high end of those bell notes. You can hear the room.
Yeah.
So whoever did they have to bake videotape the way they do with 2-inch tape?
So they especially with these old 3/4 inch tapes. Yes. And I'm not sure if it was that one in particular, but an archivist that helped us on the film, Eric Kuhlberg, he is someone who had collected old videotapes over the years, and he had some of those things did come from his personal collection, even though they're like he recorded them off the television back in the 70s and still had his tapes. And I believe he baked them. Yes.
Wow.
For those who might not know, explain just quickly what baking a tape means.
Tape, it's magnetic tape that holds these particles onto the plastic material of the tape. And what happens when tapes go through a machine, some of that particles fall off when the heads of the tape machine are reading the information on the tape. And they bake the tape because it makes those particles glue back to the tape, essentially.
It literally is baking.
It's you use like an
it goes into an
easy
oven.
bake
It's
oven.
It's
These
not a joke.
low temperature ovens that like you could use. They used to make for kids these easy bake ovens where you could bake muffins with a light bulb, essentially.
Yeah.
It's a machine that's like that, the very low temperature oven. And it just makes all those particles stick back together so the machine can read it again.
Isn't the world an amazing place?
There's a real science to it too. You can't just ask any audio engineer to kind of do this for you. There's like a few guys or girls who are like the ones who can do it. The dying art. Yeah.
Yeah, because once you run a tape through the machine and the particles fall off, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
You can't get it back.
Wow.
So it's digitize your old tapes while you still can.
Well, and I have to say, I'm a fan of music as it ages. I don't mind the scratch or the little bit of static and vinyl. I like that my album covers get a little old because they aren't in jewel cases. It means I cared enough to read the liner notes and pore over it or stare at the picture. But we do have another question, I believe.
And that perfectly leads into this question. It's two-part. First, the audience wants to know what it was like to work with Bill Wharton's original score for the background music of the film. And for every panelist, how can music create a bridge to today from your perspective?
Well, I'll answer the first part of working with my dad for the score was such an amazing and special experience because my dad is a musician and songwriter, and I've always loved his music and admired his talent. But I never expected that I would get to work with him because although he tried to teach me how to play guitar when I was a kid, I never practiced and I never learned how to actually do it with any skill. And he's very skilled. But I will say that I was a little nervous about bringing him on to the project because well, he hadn't, he's a very talented musician and songwriter, but he hadn't done a score for a film before. And I thought it was going to be really awkward if I had to fire my dad, but I started sending him some scenes and saying, could you try something and let's see how this could work. And he gave us a bunch of music that he had already recorded to start with, and we started using it, and it just worked really beautifully. And then I would send him scenes and he would send back some tracks, and And it was just, he really knocked it out of the park. And I thought his score was so beautiful, and it was able to do different kinds of sounds for different parts of the movie. And we got to, collaborate. And he would, because he was seeing some of the early cuts of the film, he would give me notes in a very respectful way. And his notes were always right on. So it was a really, one of the things that I loved about this project, working with Bill, who I've known and worked with for 20 something years, and coming back together to work with him, and we had this really great team. We were all in this together to make something great, at least attempt that. And getting to bring my dad into it too was just such a fantastic thing.
Before Mary told me that she was asking her dad, there was another well-known composer who tried doing some stuff. And I remember going into an edit, and the well-known composer stuff wasn't working. And then a part came up. I said, well, that's great. That's really good. And you said, well, that's actually my dad.
That's awesome. And then I guess the follow-up, and we'll start with you, Bill, is how do you feel with your experience? My gosh, you were a vice president for Viacom and MTV.
That may not be on my plus column.
How do you see, how do all three of us, we'll start with you, Bill, and we'll move towards then Mary and Amy. How do you see music forming a bridge today?
Well, it forms a bridge across generations, first of all. Probably now more than ever, probably now more than when I was a teenager, because kids have access to all the music that was ever made, pretty much. So I watched my son when he was 14 go from Tom Petty to the Byrds, and from the Byrds to Gene Clark, and finding stuff that was only released in Europe and listening to it. And that leading him through to the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, to Jackson Browne. And then Jackson Browne, he likes Jackson Browne so much, he goes, hey, this guy James Brown, and maybe that's his brother. So then he discovers James Brown. And, so the bridge across time now is much, much stronger than it was when I was a kid in 1969, and it was, the generation gap. The bridge across people, obviously music brings people together, and at its best, like during the civil rights movement, it really had a moral force. I mean, the songs of the civil rights movement were spirituals. They were either repurposed spirituals, or they were new spirituals, like A Change Is Gonna Come and Blowing in the Wind and People Get Ready. And what that did was it was so much better than the Jefferson Airplane going up against the wall, because what those spirituals did was they touched people's conscience. They said, well, you're a Christian, right? You believe in this. You're an American. You believe all men are created equal. Well, then how can you deny equality to these people? And so it was Dr. King's, the reason it was all preachers and ministers who led this, because the moral persuasion came through the music. And just as Jimmy Carter was enlightened by the music that he sang in church as a kid, America was, redeemed through this music. People still had to act on their conscience, but the music awakened the conscience. So at its best, that's what happens, But I got to say, just recently, just during the shutdown, I've been thinking about a kind of a downside of the rock and roll legacy, which is, I look at these bikers in Dakota without any masks on, and I look at President Trump going out at his rallies and playing Fortunate Son and Rockin' in the Free World and everything. And I think they're rock and roll too, because a lot of what rock and roll said to us was, we won't get fooled again. It's a town full of losers. I'm pulling out of here to win. Me, I, and so in a way, it can excite negative passions just as much as it can be a force for unity and bringing people together. And some communities are not positive communities. So it's as big as the human emotion. It can amplify any emotion.
So I think it's an important point. Power can go in both directions.
Yeah.
Mary?
Well, I think one of the things that is great about music. And I think that, one of the things that I definitely sort of one of the messages that we tried to get across in the film in a sort of subtle way is that music is really great at reminding us that we're a lot more alike than we are different. We all want to hold hands and sing and dance and shout and sing along and, engage with each other, whether, we like country or rock and roll or gospel or jazz or, avant-garde, electronic music, whatever it is that you like, and I think that, one of the things that we tried to do was we wanted to make sure that with the film that we had a wide variety of music and that we were kind of trying to bring everyone under the tent, in a sort of gospel revival kind of way, just get everybody under the tent. And, if you're a fan of the Gatlin brothers, you might come to see Larry Gatlin, or if you're a fan of Garth Brooks, that's a different kind of audience than the people who are maybe fans of Aretha Franklin or Dizzy Gillespie, and we wanted to bring everyone under the tent to sort of get at this idea of looking at Jimmy Carter, to kind of see a true American leader who made decisions kind of based on looking into his own heart and what he thought was the right thing to do. And that, to kind of remind America about the best of America, that we are, we should stand for the kind of great American values that Jimmy Carter embodies of truth and justice and, rock and roll, for whatever that means to you.
Well, it's interesting too, right? In the way you described that, it reminded me that I grew up thinking of differences as intriguing, and that by embracing the thought of something being different, I might learn something I was not going to learn in my own limited situation. And right now I feel like we vilify differences instead of try to learn from them. And even if you're learning that, no, my approach is the way to go, at least you've had that circular relationship. And so we're going to give the last word to the woman who is actually out in front of audiences when circumstances allow. How do you feel about music as a bridge?
I've had the great opportunity to get to meet and actually work with a lot of the music educators in our community because of where my sons go to school, and my older son is really passionately into drums. And so I see these fantastic teachers in different schools and in different parts of the community creating opportunities for kids to find music and hold it and let it be theirs, and sort of, as Mary just said, to look into their own hearts, because that's really the gift I think that music can do. I think even if a kid is not going to pursue music as a career or become a player, it really doesn't matter. It's that opportunity to come together with your community, put the screens down, learn something that makes you feel good and have fun doing it, right? Because music's just supposed to be fun. And so I think that it's a vital part of the community. I think it really actually saves lives, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
If I can just jump in, it's like that just ties back to what you said at the top, that Jimmy Carter was someone who came up singing in church. Right. Music wasn't something you watched other people do. Yeah. Music was something you did and you participated in. Yeah. And one of my favorite memories of my life is going up to the Ramble, one of the first ones, and sitting in the room off the kitchen before the show with you and your dad passing around the guitar and the mandolin, and Alan Toussaint was there, and Elvis Costello was there, and just singing together, which you clearly did so naturally. And I mean, that's really kind of the point, is that if music is something that you do, which is what music has been for 1,000,000 years,
right.
It's only in the last 80, 90 years that people have gone from everybody getting around the piano in the parlor to let's watch somebody else do it.
Right. And
And
that's why the music teachers are so important.
That's why the music teacher is so
'Cause
crucial,
they're making
because
that
they are
happen.
doing what music should really do.
I really
And there
feel
have been
strongly
a lot
about
of
that too.
studies that show that kids who learn music in school do better in math and science. And I
Yeah.
always thought, I've been thinking about this a lot too, that, you know, Jimmy Carter was a scientist. He studied nuclear
Yeah.
physics. And there has to be some connection there too, with his sense of rhythm and his sense of, you know, being able to see
Logic.
the patterns in things,
It's
and
math.
logic.
It's math. you
Yeah,
know?
Well, one
exactly.
thing touches another. It's that circular
Yeah.
relationship again. Unfortunately, it's getting a little late in Belgium, so it's almost time to wrap.
The
I would
Flemish.
so like to thank Bill Flanagan, Mary Wharton, and Amy Helm for joining us, and we'd like to thank you for joining us for BW Bethel Woods at Home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't miss the show.